Hi everyone, and welcome to the Cosmic Calendar. We'll begin to look at the upcoming cosmic weather for the next 2 weeks or so. So this is between the 12th of August, when we have the full moon in Aquarius, through to the 27th of August, when we have our next new moon, which will be in Virgo. So I will be doing a separate forecast looking at the particular energies of the waning moon, and all the kind of symbolic themes around the full moon in Aquarius. So this is going to focus more on the transits, the planetary transits, the upcoming aspects between the planets that can kind of change the kind of atmosphere from day to day as we move through the next 2 weeks of this waning moon cycle. So let's get into it a little bit and see what we've got to look forward to. As I say, if you are interested in getting access to the other forecasts, then by all means subscribe to my website. Just go to astrologysphere.com/subscribe, and if you sign up for my newsletter, which is free, you will get access to that forecast. So as we can see, the full moon in Aquarius takes place on the 12th at about 2:35 BST, so that's British summertime, and it'll be at around about 19 or so degrees of Aquarius. So I will get into this, as I say, in more detail in a separate forecast, but just to say that it is going to be quite a volatile time, because we've got two sort of competing sets of energies or kind of influences, some of which started at the new moon that we had a couple of weeks ago, where I talked a lot about that kind of grand cross involving the nodes and Saturn and Uranus, and this is going to start really kind of coming to the fore now, because the day before the full moon we have the Sun making a square to Uranus, so it's kind of setting off that grand cross, or sort of if you like, giving it energy. So we could feel it a little bit more now than we did over the 2 weeks of the waxing moon cycle from that new moon in Leo. But needless to say, as I said, it could be quite a volatile time, a time when a little bit of fear and uncertainty or kind of unpredictability kind of comes into play, and this can always make people a little bit fearful or kind of do knee-jerk type of reactions, kind of impulsive reactions. So I think just bear that in mind, because at the full moon, emotions do tend to run high anyway. And just sort of, if you can, kind of gird your loins until the sort of the wave has passed, because it does, anything to do with Aquarius or Uranus does tend to jangle the nerves and cause a bit of anxiety. And as we know, when we are anxious, we don't always make the best decisions. We tend to make decisions more from kind of fear. So I think, if you can, just wait a couple of days before you decide to do anything, particularly important, make any important decisions. And as we can see, this energy will last into the weekend. It happens on a Friday, and it will kind of last into the weekend, because there isn't really much happening until the 14th, which is the Sunday. And that's when things get a little bit more busy. So first of all, we have a trine between Mars and Pluto, and I think this is actually going to be a good thing. It's going to offset the energy that we had with that Venus Pluto opposition that we had on the 9th. Quite difficult energy, and I think we were kind of having to come to terms with the potential for manipulation or sort of control in terms of money and in terms of relationships in particular. But it could also be something to do with creativity. Now, of course, Mars sort of enters the pictures, and we are dealing with a much more positive aspect of trine. And so now we can really apply our will to make positive changes for the better. We can feel very empowered. Very often this transit means that we have a lot of physical energy, so always a good idea to sort of exercise if you can, to get rid of any excess energy, so that we don't become sort of overly, we don't become excessively sort of assertive, if you like, kind of tip over into perhaps being a little bit too keen, too overly enthusiastic, or possibly a bit pushy. But generally speaking, as I said, it is very positive. It does mean that we can really be very focused. We can direct our energy in one direction, very sort of almost with like laser precision. And this is great if you are trying to get through quite a mammoth task, or something that's quite difficult, that requires a lot of focus and concentration. And maybe it's something that's technically sort of difficult, or it requires managing a lot of detail, or it just simply requires like a push of will and of kind of assertiveness to sort of break through barriers, that type of thing. So a great day to make changes. Also, it can be a good day for taking strategic decisions. but definitely you'll see results for your actions. They may take a while to sort of manifest because Pluto does move quite slowly, but nonetheless I think they will have far-reaching consequences. So again, you want to sort of think carefully and plan before you actually execute to make sure that things sort of go in your favor. On the other side, we've got the Sun opposing Saturn. Again, this is playing into that grand cross that I was talking about. So it's setting off the opposite sort of part of the cross, which is Saturn. Saturn is still in a kind of a square to Uranus. So we could see some of the kind of aftershocks of the Saturn-Uranus square, which we had in December of 2021. So I think this could affect financial markets in particular because it did sort of bring a lot of fear and uncertainty into the equities market and the crypto market. And I think we could see some similar kind of behavior now. And it's interesting that it's coming a couple of days after the Federal Reserve is due to sort of meet and to discuss consumer price inflation. And a lot of people are expecting, certainly in Europe anyway, the Bank of England has put up its base rates, I think almost for the first time, and European banks, central banks are kind of thought to follow. And there's a lot at the moment around the cost of living crisis, and that is expected to deepen as we move into the autumn because of things like droughts in Europe, which are meaning that commodity prices are likely to go up for staple crops, which is going to mean that food is going to cost more. There is still a question around energy, of course, energy security, and the drought isn't helping that either because of kind of dam capacity being lowered, so that countries like Spain and Portugal, for example, can't generate as much hydroelectric power as they would normally from kind of their water reserves. So I do think that the Saturn opposition to the Sun is where authority figures could sort of introduce over the next couple of days, say going into that Monday, because again there's not really much happening on the Monday, could introduce a little bit of fear and uncertainty and ask people to sort of brace themselves, possibly have to tighten their belts, that kind of thing. So possibly some bad news coming from political leaders or from sort of economic figures, that kind of thing, possibly maybe even some negative earnings announcements as far as certain companies are concerned, kind of state companies like, say, banks, or a sort of a household name that maybe is generally considered to be quite a safe bet. So it could even be the bond market that there's sort of a little bit of bad news kind of coming out of the bond market. But just something to bear in mind. I am going to try and do a separate forecast for crypto on YouTube. I haven't done one in a while. I've done a couple of written forecasts. So if you haven't already subscribed to my Astro Insights blog, I suggest that you do, because I'm kind of preferring to sort of do written forecasts at the moment over on that kind of website. So if you are wondering why I haven't really posted on YouTube, it's because I'm doing written forecasts. So either follow me on Twitter, where I usually put a link to the latest blog post, or else just follow me on the blog itself, and you'll get notified when I sort of post. But anyway, moving on, we then come to Wednesday, or Tuesday rather, the 16th of August, and things now take a kind of a positive turn, generally speaking, in terms of the overall kind of atmosphere and outlook. So from Wednesday onwards, Mercury makes a trine to Uranus, so this is positive energy coming into that grand cross, so almost like good news sort of entering after bad. So it's kind of like the rainbow possibly after the thunderstorm. So I think we can expect either a kind of a shift of mindset, so a change in perspective, which moves out of that kind of fear and anxious energy and into something that's a little bit more balanced, that can say, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't sort of overreact here. Maybe there are some upsides that we haven't considered. It's definitely great for experimenting, for trying new things, new systems, new ways of solving problems. It's great for expressing unusual or kind of radical viewpoints, and this I think will play into the hexagram that's going to be activated at this full moon, hexagram 49. Again, if you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll know more about that. And it's also great for anything technical, so announcements, PR, sort of kind of press conferences, that kind of thing, product launches. It's a great time to be inventive, as I say, to sort of try to solve important scientific or technical problems, and to come at things from a fresh perspective, because very often we will see a solution, we'll have that aha moment that was sort of eluding us before. And then as we move to Wednesday, we have a kind of a minor sort of niggly aspect between the Sun and Neptune. This is a quincunx, and generally speaking, quincunxes are about making adjustments, so having to sort of like try to make some changes that are going to bring us more into alignment with a kind of a flowing energy. So it's a great time to sort of remain open and to see what solutions or things come to you rather than taking action. I think Sunday is a great day for taking action with that Mars trine to Pluto, but now we kind of come to slightly more receptive energy with this Sun Neptune quincunx, and this is more about kind of being dreaming or receptive rather than making decisions. You could have an important dream now. You could find yourself kind of being visited by inspiration, but it might be in a way that's not initially perceptible or that you might not recognize. So it's a good idea to sort of just be open to what sort of comes to you, jot it down or kind of note it, and that maybe later on things will become a lot clearer once the sort of the cloud or the fog kind of clears, because there is always a tendency with Neptune for there to be a little bit of fog or confusion. So you definitely may not have clarity immediately, but it will come later. So just trust that things will unfold in their own kind of time and space. And then we move on to Thursday, where things get really bright. We have a really lovely trine between the two benefics, Venus and Jupiter. So this is a really positive energy. Jupiter's still in Aries, and as I said in my last written forecast about cryptocurrency, Jupiter's retrograde period, particularly while it still remains in Aries, I think is going to be very buoyant and kind of quite bullish for Bitcoin. And we have seen that the minute that Jupiter turned retrograde, which was a couple of weeks ago, at that new moon in Leo, things started to improve in the crypto market slowly, but we have seen a relief rally, and I think things could reach a new peak around about the 18th or 19th or so of August. So I think helped here by the benefics. Generally speaking, for most people, this is a great time to sort of have to find love, to kind of reach a milestone when it comes to a creative project, to have some good luck when it comes to money and abundance. So this is a great time to sort of try and manifest your heart's desire, to follow a passion, to try and find meaning or value in something that you're doing, a situation, that kind of thing. But generally it's a very pleasurable aspect, so a great time to socialize, to kind of go to a social gathering or attend like an arts type of event, like a festival, something like that. But definitely, or kind of go away on a short break. Very, very pleasurable. So that happens at about 9:02 a.m. But we'll probably be, in orb for the next couple of days. So I'd say, into the weekend, which is good because the weekend is slightly more volatile. First of all, we've got Mercury making a quincunx to Saturn. So this is kind of coming off the fact that it's trining Uranus, and therefore is going to be sort of like making a slightly more kind of frictional aspect to Saturn because of that grand cross. So concentration may be a challenge. You might find that your mind sort of like blows a few circuits, or you just sort of find that there's a lot of information coming in and you can't think clearly. So it might be a good idea again to just note things down and adjust your workload, or make lists and sort of then try to sort of sort through the information a little bit later on when you're feeling a little bit more kind of logical. The same thing happens on Friday the 19th, where the Sun makes the quincunx to Pluto. So again, I think this is a sort of an adjustment after the negative opposition between Venus and Pluto on the 9th, and then the positive aspect between Mars and Pluto on the 14th. So it's almost like, okay, now your conscious mind needs to make a few adjustments, maybe make some decisions about where you're going to kind of head next, or how you're going to sort of use whatever's happened as a result of Pluto to sort of empower yourself, because very often Pluto brings about events that are beyond our control. It's a transpersonal planet, so it can be a little bit fated where certain situations or sort of trends tend to end, and this is on kind of a global scale, so it can be sort of like financial systems, financial trends, things to do with like war, so kind of macro trends that we can't really control. And I think now Obviously, the best time to sort of pivot or make strategic decisions is the 14th, but you may not have all the information that you need. It may be that you need that aha moment on the 16th, and and that you then need to make some adjustments or just sort of tune into how you feel. Sort of physically, because this combination is very often kind of tunes into our biological urges and also to our kind of our ego and our sense of, as I say, empowerment in the world, our sense of authority. So it could also have something to do with adjusting to decisions made by an authority figure, for example. So just something to be aware of on Friday. And then on Saturday, Mars ingresses into Gemini. So this should be quite positive. Mars has been in Taurus for the last few weeks, and Mars tends to get a little bit frustrated in Taurus because Taurus moves quite slowly. It doesn't really like to make radical changes or take risks. So I think entering Gemini is going to be a lot happier. It's a time to sort of initiate ideas, to spread information, and to speed up. So as I say, if you have felt kind of held back or hindered in some way, this is a time when you may feel that things freewheel a little bit more. So you can be a lot more decisive, assertive, communicate your needs and desires, and generally sort of take action in order to sort of move forward, particularly when it comes to things like politics, the media, ideas, teaching, learning, or travel, particularly local travel. And then on the 21st, Mercury makes an opposition to Neptune. Again, this is a slightly more difficult aspect. Neptune, again, is almost it can be seen sometimes as the sort of the higher kind of octave of Mercury, in the sense that it can be a little bit about right brain or intuitive thinking, and Mercury tends to be more about not necessarily logic, but being a little bit cunning or making strategic decisions or just thinking on the hoof. And with Neptune opposing Mercury, there could be a little bit of, again, brain fog, confusion, misperceptions, misunderstandings, or just an inability to see things kind of logically or clearly. So confusion, misperception, and even deceit can sometimes be one of the sort of the consequences of this particular transit. So it's just something to be aware of. Don't necessarily take things at face value. If your gut or there's something that's kind of niggling about what somebody says, or you read something, just do your research and make sure that, just kind of confirm it before you sort of make any rash kind of moves. But I think this should be offset by the trine that Mercury makes to Pluto the next day on the 22nd. So this is Monday the 22nd. So this should be a lot more positive, and I think again it could continue some of those themes from the 14th when we had that Mars trine. Mercury now making a trine, so it could be that you now have a conversation about a decision that you made either on the 14th or the 19th. You could kind of do some important research, as I said, which I think will help to clarify any confusion or misperceptions you had on the 21st with that opposition to Neptune. Great day to then go away, do your research, to sort of penetrate sort of deeper, sort of go below the surface, to sort of investigate further, if you like, because this is great for penetrating insights and kind of deep conversations, but also for making powerful speeches or being persuasive. So if you need to sort of convince, like on a kind of lobbying level or a marketing level or a political level, this is a great time to make, kind of pivotal speeches. The main thing is to stay in your integrity, though, so that, what you say, because what you say could carry quite a lot of weight. I think it's really important, I think, throughout this particular waning moon cycle, to be in your integrity because of the hexagram. It's really asking us to sort of stand by our principles, to act from a principled place, and to sort of match up words and actions. So, again, this is a good time to sort of really walk your talk. And then the following day on the 23rd, the Sun ingresses into Virgo, so this is the start of Virgo season, so quite a big shift in terms of the overall energies. We're kind of entering autumn, or we're getting to that sort of halfway point now, where we are kind of a month away from the equinox, and so it's time to focus for the next 4 weeks or so on the details, on making lists, on being focused, on being useful, on making progress. This is a great time to really to be very productive, to be helpful, to be of service to others. But it's also a good time to be discerning and discriminating, but not to let us tip over into sort of being petty, picky, or judgy. So, it's good to have critical faculties and to sort of employ your critical thinking abilities, but not necessarily to sort of tip over into that place where nothing's ever good enough, and that is the sort of the shadow side of Virgo, is that it can be a little bit perfectionistic. So just something to bear in mind. But then on the 24th, Venus makes a lovely trine to Chiron. This is really healing energy in a lot of ways. So it's a great time to improve relationships, either sort of creative collaborations, romantic relationships, social, kind of friendships, that sort of thing, or maybe financial ties. Maybe a good time to make up your bank manager if your credit rating has not been wonderful of late. So it's a good time to heal relationships, to improve money matters, to perhaps correct or refine a creative project, that kind of thing. Now, interestingly, Uranus will also station on the same day at around about 2:53 p.m. BST. So quite a pivot point here for Uranus. I think it's turning retrograde, if I'm not mistaken. So one of the final planets to turn retrograde since, I think, May. So when Uranus is retrograde, it does tend to, as I say, internalize the energy more. It can also be an opportunity to go back and to course correct. So that's something to bear in mind. Of course, a lot will depend on where Uranus sits in your chart, what house it's in, what houses it rules, what aspects it makes to your natal planets, and so on and so on. So, I won't kind of get into too much detail other than to say that, of course, in terms of mundane astrology, Uranus does tend to rule technology. It also rules things like electricity. To an extent, uranium, the mineral uranium. So obviously that's used in nuclear energy. So we could have some announcements during this period about perhaps switching back on some nuclear reactors as a way of, ensuring energy security, given that we've got quite a lot of shortages in terms of things like coal and oil as a result of the war in Ukraine. So it could be when governments decide to switch back on some nuclear reactors, that kind of thing. And then a few days later, we've got Mercury entering Libra. So again, this is great for any kind of diplomacy, for legal matters, for negotiations of any kind. It can also be a time when we tend to be quite sociable, when we're very tactful, so we can address maybe some slightly uncomfortable or difficult issues that we didn't feel we could broach before. And it's also a good time to pursue artistic projects, particularly anything to do with writing, because Mercury is very much about self-expression, writing, teaching, that kind of thing. So yes, you may decide to sort of create a course, maybe in something creative, maybe to give an art course or create a course online, something like that. But this energy, again, will be around for some time. So, it's not necessarily something you have to act on the 26th itself. And then, of course, we reach the new moon in Virgo on the 27th, which is where I will pick up the next forecast. So I think you can get a sense that it's quite an eventful 2 weeks. We've got a lot of very positive energy on one hand and quite sort of difficult energy, challenging energy on the other. And I think we're really going to start to feel that from the full moon, as I say, where we have these conflicting sort of influences kind of occurring at once. So just something to bear in mind. But as I said, there are some really good days to mark in your calendar, such as the 18th with that lovely Venus-Jupiter trine, and of course the Mars-Pluto trine on the 14th. Those really kind of stand out. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that the next 2 weeks are productive and constructive. And I'll catch you again in a few weeks' time for the next installment of the Cosmic Calendar.